All right, jobs. How would you make sure that Boston businesses employ Boston residents? And how, as mayor, would you prepare city residents for higher quality jobs? And this question goes to Felix Arroyo.
Thank you for the question. You know, I'm really proud of what the City Council did this week. I offered legislation called Invest in Boston that would, in fact, take the $1 billion that we have in banking services in the city and deposits and say that if you want to do business with the city, then you must be a bank that invests in our neighborhoods. Today, until this legislation gets implemented and signed by the mayor, we give them $1 billion of our business and our deposits, and we don't ask them if they lend to small businesses. We don't ask them if they lend to people looking to buy homes. We don't ask them if they hire Bostonians. With Invest in Boston, they won't be able to do business with us unless they do business with our city. I stood up to the big banks to get that done, and I'm proud of the unanimous vote that we had on the City Council. That legislation will create more small businesses, will in turn hire more Bostonians.
All right, no one's raised their hand yet,
Right
so
here.
I'm going to ask Dan Conley a question. You want to revise the Boston residents' jobs policy to require more jobs for residents and for minorities and women. Why don't you delve into that?
Well, the Boston Jobs Ordinance is not being enforced to the extent that it could and should. I've spoken to just too many union craftsmen who are out of work. These goals are not being met and not being hit. So if it's one skill that I certainly can bring to the mayor's office, I know how to enforce things, and we're going to enforce the Boston Jobs Ordinance if I become mayor. But I also think, look, it needs to be adjusted. We need to consider an adjustment there. It's been pointed out that our city is now 53 or 54% persons of color. So we need to, reflect that, and we need to make sure that we employ our Boston residents. I'm also a huge proponent of jobs training. It's so important. We're not talking to our employers. Our job training programs are operating without consultation with each other. This is a great way to move people into better jobs.
Charles Yancey is next.
Well, I believe the mayor of Boston has a responsibility to enforce the Boston Jobs and Boston Residency policy. I will definitely enforce it, but I will also extend it to any other business doing business with the city of Boston. Office supply companies, companies that provide architectural services, legal services. I will insist that those firms also have a plan to hire Boston residents.
Charles Clemons.
The Boston residents are so tired of seeing people come from Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Maine taking those jobs. As mayor of the city of Boston, I would enforce the Boston job residency policy. Also, we would hit those developers with fines. Just like the regular people pay fines, we're going to hit them with those fines and take those fines and invest those fines into our schools and take that money and invest it into a job training facility, understanding that we have different skill levels in our community. And then also, just like Connecticut has 1/3 of the construction that's going on, and they have 13 compliance officers. We need to take those 3 compliance officers that we have for the 200 construction jobs and bring that up to 50.
Marty Walsh.
Fall River, Quincy, and Worcester have all been sued over the residency policy. So what we have to do in Boston is be creative. One way we have to do is rewrite the policy and work with the legislature to get a policy. The current policy is in place right now, and the city of Boston is being sued. And Mayor Menino is trying to enforce his policy, and he does on a lot of projects. It has been enforced. We also have to look at doing, when we give companies tax breaks in the city of Boston and we work on their development, that they write into the contract that they will be hiring Boston residents to work on the project both in construction and long term.
Charlotte Goler-Ritchie.
Programs like this have undergone challenges, and we need to make sure that the program that we have in the city of Boston can withstand any legal challenge. So that would be very important for me as mayor, to make sure we have a strong defense for a program like this, or that it gets revised so that it can withstand a challenge, and that we have monitors, people who go around to sites to ensure that people from our city are working on those sites.
You would use casino money to create jobs.
Well, I will use, there will be a lot of ways that I would want to use that 32 million, I think is what is expected to come in on annual revenues that I will want to use for job creation, for job training, a variety of things.
All right, John Conley.
Well, you have to enforce the Boston Job Resident Policy, as everyone has said, but the key there is, can we direct those contractors and people in the construction business to people ready to take those jobs, and that's the end that we've got to be focused on, so that we can just direct them, go to this place and hire these people, and that means we've got to invest more in workforce training, adult education, and vocational education in our Boston public schools. And let's not forget our school's role here. We ought to have every high school connected to an employer, connected to a college and university, and connected to a nonprofit, getting our people, our young people, ready to take jobs in today's economy. Longwood Medical Area Lab Technician, one example.
Mike Ross is next.
I agree with everything that's been said up here around the Boston residency job policy. I also think we have to think macroeconomic policy here as well. We have to grow jobs for our region. And what seems to have been happening for years is that we would fight with Cambridge. Cambridge is not the enemy. Cambridge could be our friend. We really should be all over the world bringing back real jobs for all of our citizens so that we can all work.
Felix Arroyo.
Jobs ordinance policy has got to be enforced. Today it says 50% Bostonians, 25% people of color, 10% women. It's got to be increased. That was done in the 80s. This is 2013. We can most certainly employ more than 50% Bostonians. We can get up to 50, 52, 53% people of color, and we most definitely can find more than 10% women ready to go to work. The sad part is that when they graduate Madison Park High School, our tech vocational school, they're not ready to get on the job. The Ferdinand Building, which is 2 blocks down the street. We have to invest in our vocational educational system. We know how to do it. Worcester's done it. They have an excellent Voc Tech High School. If Worcester can figure out, Boston can figure out, and as a mayor, I will turn around Madison Park High.
Bill Walzak.
Yes. My education blueprint calls for what I'm calling career academies in 11th and 12th grades, which are directly connected to the business community and to academia and to the healthcare community for jobs, to create opportunities for young people to get in pipelines for careers. I think especially in the BRJP issue, what we don't have is we don't have enough kids of color and women that are going into the trades. And what we need to do is we need to make that kind of relationship so that young people are able to get into the plumbing and electrical and other kinds of trades so that we can make sure that we have enough workers to be able to fulfill the BRJP guidelines.
And John Barros, and then we've heard from the whole panel.
All right. Well, I've done this. We worked with the Salvation Army to make sure that we hit 53% residents, 54% of color, and that we blew away the 10% women with a goal of 15%. And then we made sure that 57% of the contracts on that site went to women-owned and minority-owned businesses. We can do this, but we need to make sure that we have goals that can be upheld. And we need to do that by having a third-party community benefits partner on this. The city has been challenged. Cities have been challenged all over the state, which is why having a third party, which is what we served in this deal with the Salvation Army and Suffolk Construction, it can be legally binding, and we can do this. We also need to make sure we have training and accessible, affordable bonding funds for our small contractors.
All right, John Barros, we need to pause for just a moment. Don't leave your seats, though, for some radio housekeeping. This is 90.9 WBUR FM Boston, also broadcasting on 92.7 WBUA Tisbury, Martha's Vineyard, WSDH Sandwich, WCCT FM Harwich, and WBUR AM West Yarmouth. We stream at WBUR.org. Good evening again. I'm Bob Oakes, along with Meghna Chakrabati. We're in the midst of a 2-hour live forum coming to you from the Boston campus of the University of Massachusetts with 11 of the 12 candidates for mayor of Boston.
The co-sponsors of tonight's event are the University of Massachusetts Boston's John W. McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies and the College of Advancing and Professional Studies and the Boston Foundation as well. The forum is streaming, a video stream, on WMB.edu and at tbf.org. Now, if we could just do another lightning round here. I thought those were very revealing. And we're going to let's start here with John Barros. We're going to have, and I'm going to limit you to one name for this question, okay, the answer to this question. Who is the political figure at any level you most admire?
One name?
One name.
Sorry. Obama.
Charles Yancey.
Nelson Mandela.
John Conley.
Obama race to the top.
Bill Walzak.
Also Nelson Mandela.
Charlotte Gorla Ritchie.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee for opposing the war.
Felix Arroyo.
Easy. My father, Felix D. Arroyo.
Charles Clemons.
President Barack Hussein Obama.
Mike Ross.
I'm going to say Roosevelt.
So it can be
Which
deceased.
one?
Yeah.
FDR, do you want living or not living? I'm sorry.
Any level. Okay.
I was
Dan
going all the
Conley.
way back.
So from history, Abraham Lincoln.
Marty Walsh.
Oh, I didn't know his history. The president, Obama.
All right. Those were political figures. Now, name a person outside of politics that you particularly admire. And we'll go in random order again. Charlotte Gola-Ritchie, you're first.
I guess I'll pick a page out of Mr. Arroyo's book and say that I do admire my dad, who I lost this summer, but he stood up for equality and opportunity and things like that. So I'll say Simeon Golar.
John Barrows.
Yeah, I'd go close to home as well. I had a child 8 days ago, and the only reason I'm able to run this race is because my amazingly strong and beautiful wife, Chinta Barrows, has held down the fort, and I owe everything to her.
Felix Arroyo.
And my dad, I'm going to go with my mother, Elsa Montana. a 30-plus year Boston public school teacher who's dedicated her life to educating the children of the city.
The most political answer tonight. Charles Yancey.
Alice W. Yancey co-founded ABCD along with Robert Cord, raised 9 children, worked 2 or 3 jobs, has the Mattapan Branch Library community meeting room named after her. Alice Yancey, my mother.
Charles Clemons.
My mother's sister, Virginia Morrison, Executive Director of the Neighborhood Development Corporation of beautiful Uptown Grove Hall.
Michael Ross.
I have 2 parents listening right now, so I'm going to go. I am going to go with the way I first heard your question when you talked about someone outside of politics that's made a huge difference in this world. And the first person that jumped into my name in my head was Martin Luther King.
Okay. John Conley.
Any great teacher in our public schools.
Any great teacher. Okay. Dan Conley.
I think my mother will actually understand. I'm going to name my father, who sacrificed so much to raise his 7 children, working 12-hour days at the phone company if necessary to put us through school and so forth. So my father.
Bill Walzak.
The love of my life, my wife of 40 years, Boston public school teacher, worked so hard in the Boston public schools, Linda Walzak.
And Marty Walsh.
Dr. Paul Farmer, who founded Partners in Health.
Okay.
One more quick lightning round question. Tell us what you'd like to find yourself doing after public service. Felix Arroyo.
You know, going through school, it was either be on the Boston Red Sox or be a history teacher. I think I have a better shot at the history teacher.
Dan Conley.
Retired and reading the great works of literature and history.
Charles Clemons.
Mentoring young people in media, television, radio, newspaper.
Michael Ross.
I would love to be able to support myself painting oil paintings forevermore.
Marty Walsh.
Drive across this country and experience the entire country.
Charlotte Gola-Ritchie.
Well, I met my husband, who trained my group going to the U.S. Peace Corps, and he and I have talked about maybe joining up again at some point in the future. So maybe Peace Corps volunteer again.
John Barrows.
Joining a band and playing the drums.
Bill Walzak.
I'd like to continue serving on nonprofit boards, and I want to start a bluegrass band.
A lot of artists, frustrated artists on the panel. John Conley.
Need a drummer, by the way.
I'd like to start in elementary school.
Charles Yancey.
I'd like to take my wife of 43 years to Segundi Chakrabati in Ghana, our sister city.
Have we heard from everybody?
Heard from everyone.
Okay. I think the next question is yours.
Indeed, and it's going to Charles Clemons. So back to the 1-minute answers. In the wake of the marathon bombings, the Boston law enforcement community has put great energy into preventing future violent attacks. What about violence in every Boston neighborhood? Is there more that police could and should be doing to address that persistent and difficult problem? Again, Charles Clemons.
Thank you. As a former Boston police officer for 10 years, correctional officer for 2, and special police officer for 4 years, community policing, bringing back the trust to the community. There was a time where the residents called the police and the police would respond. Right now, that's not happening. So we need to have police officers that are culturally sensitive, police officers that speak the language, that look like the people in the community, that walk the beat, that do business in the community, that worship in the community. But also, we have to stop focusing on the victim and the suspect. We need to go all the way to the beginning, to where the guns come from. We have to look at the manufacturers. There are no manufacturing companies in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. By the way, as of today's date, when it comes to the Boston Marathon, we have 138 shootings that have taken place. We need to stop that.
All right, let's start with Felix Arroyo.
We have got to go back to very real and true community policing, which means police walk in the neighborhoods, police bicycle in the neighborhoods, they look like the neighborhoods and create intentional relationships between themselves and the communities. That's the short-term plan. Long-term, we have to understand that the most violent thing that happens in our neighborhoods is in fact called poverty. When the unemployment rates go down, the crime rates go down. 80% of our violent crime is in 3 neighborhoods in the city of Boston. Not everybody's Boston is the same.
That's right.
And we have to understand as well, and it should be no surprise to the people here today, that those are 3 of the most economically depressed neighborhoods in the city of Boston. As mayor, I will be committed to building pathways out of poverty, closing the achievement gap, and ensuring everyone's voice is heard. That has been my life's work, and that is my goal as the mayor of the city of Boston.
Charlotte Golar-Ritchie.
I agree with community policing. We want our police officers to leave the cruiser, walk a beat. That's clear. I will join with other mayors to deal with the flow of guns into our city. I will also push for a universal federal background check. That is really important. But one thing that I am proposing and have proposed in this campaign is the establishment of an Office of Youth Affairs that would focus on employment, not just summer jobs, but year-round employment for 15 to 24-year-olds. And I want young people sitting in my cabinet, shoulder to shoulder, with the police commissioner and the school superintendent to help us establish an agenda that will help to bring peace in our streets. Our young people have spoken very loudly. They want to have stronger relationships with police, and I will push that as mayor.
Let's move down to Marty Walsh.
A lot of these young people that commit the crime have already been sentenced and spent time in jail. And I think one of the things that we have to do a better job at is our reentry program. So when young folks or mid-aged folks commit crimes, we don't really reenter them. We put them back into society with no skills. And they had no skill in the beginning that got them into trouble. So I think we have to, and the City of Boston has a reentry program out in Long Island called the Wyman Reentry Center. And I'd like to strengthen that program and expand that program and work with our jails here in the Suffolk County as well as our state penitentiaries to try and cut the route before we get them on the street.
John Barros.
Shocked Marty didn't say it, so I'll say it for him. We need to do a better job around our drug addiction problem. Instead of arresting people who have drug addictions, we need to provide beds, we need to provide programs and make sure that we are solving for the problem and not just managing it. It's a big problem. We also need to invest in our people. I understand that community policing is really important, but the way that you get a partner on the other side of community policing is investing in our people, investing in our communities, and making sure that our civic infrastructure is strong, that community police can actually meet with the neighborhood association, can meet with the crime watch groups. It's really important. And then in youth jobs correlate directly to crime rates. We've seen reports on it time and time again. And as mayor, I'd make sure we double the investment we make on youth jobs.
Bill Walzak.
A long-term solution to this is hope on the part of young people who will have opportunities for careers rather than opportunities for low-paying jobs. I think the other aspect of this, though, is that we are the ears and eyes of the police department as people, and what we need to do is do a better job of coordinating all the services that go on, and especially using technology to allow people to understand the kinds of crimes that are going on. We know that from the Boston Foundation study that there's only a few hundred families that are in this, and we need to be able to have a crisis intervention aspect to how we deal with the families that are in crisis to keep them out of getting involved in violence and drugs and crime.
Let's move back to the other side here. Dan Conley.
Felix mentioned that most of the crime in the city is confined to 3 neighborhoods. I'd even argue it's confined to even narrower stratas within those neighborhoods. We understand that 99% of the people who live in Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury are hardworking, honest, decent citizens who want nothing more than everybody else in the city, a safe neighborhood to raise their families and have a business. One of the things I would do immediately, and I would instruct Ed Davis, because I intend to keep him, is to really reinvigorate and reinstitute the ceasefire principles that worked so well in the 1990s. That's short term, but long term, the long term is the root cause of crime, and that's true education reform, taking it to the next level so that these young people in our city, maybe as few as 300 or 400, get out of high school, hopefully into college, or at least a good job, and that will do wonders in those neighborhoods for
Charles
violence.
Yancey?
One of the first things I did when I was elected to the Boston City Council was to fight to build a police station in the district I represented to replace a trailer which had only 2 officers in it. I also passed legislation to require the police to provide not just crime statistics, but deployment numbers so that we can, in fact, put the police where the problems are. Listen, Trayvon Martin should have taught us that we must value the lives of everyone and not presume that if you happen to be a young African-American teenager that you're a criminal. We must change the attitude that we have where we value some lives over others, and unfortunately that's demonstrated almost on a weekly basis in this country and even in this city. Finally, I believe we need to hire outreach workers, youth workers, and invest more in a cold case squad. We have far too many murderers walking the streets of Boston. They must be brought to justice.
Let's hear quickly from John Conley.
We need a comprehensive plan for safe and healthy neighborhoods, because this is just as much a public health issue as it is a law enforcement issue. We need to start with healthy minds for everyone, because we live in a society where we have devalued young Black and Latino lives that are lost on the streets of this city all the time. How are we going to deal with mental health? How are we going to deal with addiction? How are we going to deal with people living in trauma? That's a public health strategy. And don't forget the school as the connector, because a 16-year-old dropout is one of the most likely people in Boston to end up incarcerated at some point in their life. Better schools help lead to safer and healthier streets and neighborhoods.
Next question goes to Mike Ross, and it's about neighborhood development in this way. One important transportation project in the city is the Fairmont Line, which recently opened stops in underserved neighborhoods in Dorchester, Mattapan, and Hyde Park. While many envision increased residential and commercial development along the line, some worry about further gentrification. So how would you balance development and affordability? Mike Ross.
I've called for 10,000 units of housing along the Fairmont line. That's an aggressive goal, but we're going to need aggressive goals to continue to move this city forward. And we're going to have to do everything we can to try to hit those aggressive goals. There's a building in Upham's Corner in Dorchester, right outside the Fairmont T-stop at the platform, the Leon building. And it sits there, empty, and it's craving development. We need to start creating real planning and then real development in all of our neighborhoods. There are so many people wanting to move to Boston, wanting to stay in Boston, and we're failing them, because what's really happening is neighborhoods are gentrifying. And that happens when you don't build at a fast enough pace. We absolutely have to build in our communities. And we have a problem with public transportation right now, but at least where we actually have public transportation, we should be building transit-oriented development. And not one building at a time. One of the people up here mentioned their favorite building was, I think, was the Caruth building next to Ashmont in Dorchester. That was one building built. Not 5, not 10, not a bunch of buildings, but one. We can no longer think of development one building at a time, because we will not build fast enough.
You've talked about allowing developers to build high-density projects as an investment for building more affordable units. Don't you worry that that'll thrust even more people in a small area in a neighborhood that might not be ready for them?
Look, I represent the Fenway neighborhood. Fenway was gas station, parking lot, and fast food restaurant just 11 years ago. We got together, our community got together, and we planned. And we built 2 million square feet of development, $2 billion invested in that community. And as a result of that, there are thousands of people who now call the Fenway home. We can do that across the city.
All right, John Barros.
Well, I was proud to be a part of the coalition that worked on the Fairmont line as executive director of DS9. We need to finish that job first and foremost. We need better service on the line. We need to make sure that people can get in and out of those neighborhoods downtown, and it needs to be affordable. We don't have that. We don't have a line that people are using, so that's the first order of business. Transportation needs to be something that we investing in every neighborhood because we don't have transportation equity. And then yes, I would focus on transit-oriented development. It's really important. And we do have opportunities to build along that line. What we have been doing, however, is as we build affordable housing, our covenants are not long enough. We need to move to longer and I'd say permanently affordable housing structures in Boston. The market is taking care of itself. The federal subsidies are drying up, and we're not creating enough linkage to build affordability. We have to stop chasing affordability and protect and preserve more affordable housing units.
Charles Yancey.
The Fairmont line runs the length and breadth of the district I've represented for the past 3 decades. Back in 1985, we began the process of establishing stations along that line that heretofore used to just sail right through without providing any needed services. We recently added 4 new stops. We're going to add 1 or 2 more. Problem with that line is that it doesn't really serve the needs in which it was intended. The services do not exist for evening or weekends, so we're almost defeating the purpose. The first thing we have to do is make sure we have a rapid transit line, at least a full service line along the Fairmont. And we do have a number of housing developments along that line. Some even preceded the opening of the stops, like the Talbot Bernard housing and the La Viedo housing put together by the Carbon Square Neighborhood Development Corporation. And there's more to come. But we must have real service along that line for it to be effective.
Bill Walsh.
We need to take a look at the cost of housing, because we're not going to be getting the kind of subsidy out of Washington anytime in the near future, with Washington being impossible to get anything done through. So what we need to do is look at what we can do internally to lower the cost of housing. And I think what we need to do is really look at density. I think it's very important that we have transit-oriented development with high density. I also think we need to look at areas where we can eliminate the parking requirements that oftentimes add lots of cost to it. And the third thing I'd like to suggest is something that isn't being considered very much these days, which is green prefab housing, which can be done at about 30% lower cost. And I think we need to really look at those kinds of options that can produce a lot more housing at a lower cost.
Mike Ross. I'm sorry, Marty Walsh. My apologies, Marty Walsh.
I mean, I was very involved with the Fairmont line for 4 of the stops as they were constructing them, and I think one of the things that we have to do to protect the community is have a plan. We can talk about all these great ideas all day, but if we don't have a plan on how to get these businesses to come to these areas, it's not going to happen. So we need to start by working with the community on what they want to see around their stations and around in their neighborhoods. Some of those stations, you don't have enough space to build housing. You don't have enough space on the Talbot Ave station. You don't have the space there. Across the street you do. Across Washington Street you do. And I know that the Carbon Square CDC owns some of those lands. So we have to have a plan, and then we have to go out and find the businesses and developments that will come there. We have an opportunity in this city. Verizon is looking to move 500 call center jobs out of the city of Boston to North Andover. We need to get to Verizon to keep their jobs here in the city of Boston and offer a space on the Fairmont line, something like that, so the community can have real jobs in their neighborhood.
You said you've said we should use tax credits and low-interest loans to encourage developments to increase housing in all neighborhoods. We're not doing that enough right now?
No, not for smart growth. And some of the development that we're looking to build around this is middle-income housing. In my district, in Carbon Square, people in some areas are saying we have enough low-income housing because we have no opportunities. We want to create jobs. We want to make sure people have jobs. We want to create middle-class housing, and that's what families have been saying in the city of Boston.
Felix Arroyo.
Absolutely. We have got to support transit-oriented development. We have to think big when we think about transit-oriented development. You know, it was earlier someone mentioned their favorite project was the Jackson Square Development Project. I was intimately involved with the Jackson Square Department long before I was an elected official as a neighborhood activist serving in my Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Association, neighborhood council in Jamaica Plain, being a part of that. You know what the problem is? That was long before I was elected official, and it's still being built today. We're not going to get affordable housing if we don't streamline permitting at ISD. We're not going to get more businesses if we don't streamline permitting at ISD. We have got to make sure that it's easier to permit through so we can get these good projects going. And we have got to also, as a topic of transportation, we're choking many neighborhoods because of lack of public transportation. It is I live in Jamaica Plain. I have 4 train stations. I could walk to a train station. I could get to downtown in 20 minutes. But if you live in Mattapan, you don't have access to the Fairmont line, it'll take you about an hour and 15 minutes. And forget getting from Mattapan to Jamaica Plain. Not connecting neighborhoods and not connect us to downtown chokes our cities. We have to improve our public transportation and move to a 24-hour transportation.
So how are you going to squeeze the legislature to give more money to the T when the T, as we know, is already struggling financially to better transportation or expand transportation in these areas you say
I'm so glad
need
you asked me
better
that question.
transportation?
I was waiting for this question. Our governor presented a tax plan that was correct, it was right, it was just, and it was bold, and it was as close as we get to progressive taxation in the state of Massachusetts. And as a proud progressive, I proudly support progressive taxation. The legislature dropped the ball, did not do what I believe was the right thing to do. But you know what? You know what else dropped the ball? You saw very little leadership from the city on that issue. As mayor, I work with our governor to make sure that a tax plan like that actually moves forward. I will be at the State House. I'll work with the caucus of Boston legislators and let them know how important it is for our neighborhood to have good public transportation.
John Conley.
Just one piece missing from this discussion. I think the ideas are on. I hope people would look at my jobs and housing plan on my website, but we're not getting any of this done if we don't change the way the BRA operates. We need more transparency and a real dose of transparency in the BRA because we're never going to have a holistic plan across this city around development and how to make sure we close that daunting equity gap that's making us more and more a city of the very rich and the very poor, where the bottom can fall out on the poorest at any time. We lack the plan from which we should drive smart development and smart growth, and that is a function of the BRA not working in a transparent manner, and instead we develop based on who you know or how well you navigate City Hall and not whether or not it's part of a good holistic plan for the City of Boston.
Charlotte Kolar-Ritchie.
I would just add to the discussion here that the City of Boston has a portfolio of properties and many of them which are line up with at transit nodes along the Fairmount line, and I would, as mayor, want to make that property available for the construction of housing. So we would have that transit-oriented housing there. I would want to support that effort.
Charles Clemons, haven't heard from you on this.
Yes, sir. The BRA, many of the people feel that the BRA is not accountable. And the BRA definitely needs to be revamped. It needs to be separate from City Hall also. It needs to partner with the main streets, partner with the neighborhood development corporations, but also we need to have residents part of the process and who can negotiate the workforce and also benefits and affordable housing.
All right, a couple of you have mentioned the BRA, the Boston Redevelopment Authority, the overarching development sheriff in the city, so to speak. So let me ask a quick question going down the line here. Keep it as it's currently operating or get rid of it? Bill Walzak.
I would keep the Boston Redevelopment Authority and develop a very strong planning department that's essentially separate from the development side.
John Connolly.
But respectfully, the keep it or abolish it is not the question. You abolish it, be careful what you wish for. The city councilors are going to be making development decisions, and as a city councilor, that's not a good idea, okay? What we need is a reformed BRA, separate planning, drive from a holistic plan, remove the conflict of interest between planning and economic development, and do 2 other pieces I proposed as reform. Term limits for board members, and utilize technology to get the people the information so you don't go online, look a project up, and all it will say is under review.
Charles Yancey.
We have to stop this target of opportunity approach to development in the city of Boston. We need a comprehensive plan and an effective planning agency. I believe planning should precede development. That's my way of answering your question. I don't believe that the current structure of the BRA effectively does that, so I would, in fact, have a planning agency as well as a development one, but they would not be one and the same. There's too much conflict in that model.
John Barros.
You know, abolishing the BRA would make no sense because we needed a quasi-public agency to hold redevelopment authorities. That's why BRA was structured. And you abolish it, you give that away. We need to separate planning from development, the BRA, and create a planning department at the city that decentralizes planning and plans in neighborhoods so that development can be predictable in Boston. Development needs to be predictable in Boston so investors know what kind of development they're getting into and stop the conversation that is dysfunctional between community and development.
Charlotte Kolar-Ritchie.
If I'm elected mayor, I will absolutely introduce reforms to the BRA, working with my team there and with the folks in the cabinet, right? The question around creating a separate planning agency is problematic to me. For those of you who know how the BRA works, the BRA is self-supporting. It is not a city line item. We do not need to create another department that would now the city operating budget has to support. It would cost probably between $500,000, $1 million when you have to hire new staff or move over staff, pay for the overhead. I would rather use those funds to go towards helping with quality in the schools, addressing homelessness.
Okay.
I think you can still promote openness and transparency in that department without having to carve it up and then start a whole new bureaucracy.
Felix Arroyo.
Boston Redevelopment Authority is the agency that does both planning and development for the city of Boston. It has been around since the late 50s, and it is such a good idea to put both planning and development within the same agency that no other major city has copied it. We must remove planning from the Boston Redevelopment Authority, create an independent planning commission that puts it back into the control of the community. What that also does is it makes it a transparent process. No one in this room and no one in this city should depend on the benevolence of the next mayor to get their project through. It should be done on the merits and whether it's right for the community. When you separate planning from BRA, that's exactly what you'll get.
Charles Clemons.
As mayor of the City of Boston, revamping the BRA to include elected community residents who can negotiate workforce goals, community benefits, and affordable housing on behalf of our communities.
Michael Ross.
This is really simple. You plan first, you build second. The notion that any of my colleagues up here are actually talking about breaking apart the BRA in the middle of a building boom while cranes are in the air and we're about to get a new mayor is extremely concerning and should be to all of us.
Dan Conley.
As strongly as I disagree with Mike about the casino and a citywide vote, I couldn't agree with him more on this matter. The BRA, as is, I would keep the BRA as is, but certainly would infuse it with transparency, accountability, and professionalism. That's what it needs. We have $5.5 billion worth of construction underway right now. We're one of the hottest real estate markets in America, but developers and neighborhoods alike simply don't know what the rules are. They need to. That agency needs to be transparent and accountable.
Marty Walsh.
We do have a very hot market right now, and a lot of the construction that's going on are residential units. So I would definitely add some reform to the BRA. I would add a business component, business development component to it. We're building buildings in downtown Boston, and we're really having a hard time trying to fill some of these buildings with office buildings in downtown. Minus State Street project, minus Vertec Pharmaceutical. When you look around the city of Boston, there's really not a lot of construction going on as far as office space, other than Mike's Fenway area. So what I would definitely do is add some reforms. We have to add some transparency to the BRA. I would take away the responsibility of the neighborhood service coordinators in the city of Boston from construction and from the BRA, and I would add a component where we have a liaison from the BRA to the community and a liaison to the business community, so the business community understands the predictability and we can discuss these projects earlier on.
All right. Well, you know my favorite types of questions tonight end up being the lightning round questions. Keeps everyone on their toes. So one more lightning round. Here we go. What is the BPS grammar, middle, charter, or high school you consider a model of excellence? One name, the name of the school, please. Charles Clemons.
Oh, goodness gracious. Ira Allen.
Sorry, Charles. Engage in a conversation here.
That's okay.
Notes. Actually, I'll be honest, I missed it. Can you say it again?
The Ira Allen.
God, thank you. Mike Ross.
I'm going to say Worcester Tech High School because it's so striking that our Tech Voc school is not even close to Worcester's Tech Voc High School, and that should be a lesson for us to strive for an amazing Madison Park Tech Voc High School.
Okay, Dan Conley.
The Brook charters, they ought to be able to open another middle school. They ought to be able to open a high school they're a great model for education reform.
Marty Walsh.
The Elliott School in the North End. It's a fabulous school, great teachers, great principal, great parent group, a lot of excitement in that school.
Felix Arroyo.
I'm going to go with my alma mater, another Costa College, a public high school currently in Brighton, which had small classroom sizes, which was excellent for me.
Charlotte Gola-Ritchie.
So I was going to say the Elliott as well, and it has a wonderful reputation. Parents are lined up wanting to have their kids to go there.
John Barrows.
Orchard Garden Pilot School, the use of the arts, the use of longer school day, parent and community engagement, and the alignment of partnerships has taken that from a level 4 school to a level 1 school.
Charles Yancey.
I would say the Dr. William Henderson School on Dorchester Avenue is full inclusion, and it shows that that model really does work.
John Conley.
I'm going to go with my daughter's Boston Public School, the Trotter, which has gone from level 4 to level 1, just announced yesterday. The teachers, the principal there have worked so hard, and the students have too, and the parents, to make that an incredible school. Over 90% of the students going in there are living in poverty. It shows us the formula. Great principal, plus the flexible autonomies, and we can make every school great.
Bill Walzak.
My children also went to the Trotter School, but I actually co-founded 2 high schools. It's like asking which of your children you love more. So I'm going to say that both Codman Academy and the Edward Kennedy Health Careers Academy are my favorites.
Okay, one more lightning round question, and then we're back to the 2 main questions that close out the forum today. If you couldn't be mayor of Boston, but you could be mayor of another city, which one would it be? Marty Walsh.
Detroit, because I would love the challenges ahead there to turn that city around. I look forward to taking those challenges on.
Dan Conley.
San Diego for the weather.
Mike Ross.
This shouldn't even be tough. To be mayor of any city in America, it's got to be New York City.
Charles Clemons.
Atlanta.
Felix Arroyo.
San Juan, Puerto Rico. I'd be with my grandmother an awful lot.
Charlotte Gola-Ritchie.
Well, I might venture down south to the Big Apple.
John Barrows.
São Felipe, Fogo, Cabo Verde. That would be Cape Verde, where my parents are from. Would love to be mayor.
Charles Yancey.
You know, I can't think of any other city besides Boston. I guess it's because I was born here. I would say New Orleans, because of the challenges of infrastructure there, and I'd like to be a problem solver. New Orleans, Louisiana.
John Conley.
Edmonton, their school system is fully autonomous.
And Bill Walzak.
Dorchester? No, I think it'd be really cool to have a Red Sox fan as the mayor of New York.
You just might, actually. All right, so last round of questions here. And we will turn to Dan Conley for this one. Boston has a renowned artistic heritage, yet the city is consistently ranked near the bottom of major cities in terms of investment in arts and culture. Should the city provide more resources for the arts? If so, where would the money come from, and how would you spend it?
Well, the arts can add so much to the culture and dignity of our city, and it also now adds to the economy of our city. So I would be more than willing to consider adding city dollars to improve public art, for example, support museums and this sort of thing. You know, I think art is so important also to our students in terms of expanding their creativity. You know, I think of you know, the fact that so many of our students don't have art programs. So I would certainly want to engage the museums of our city, also the nonprofits that work in promoting the arts and theater. I'd be willing to invest public dollars if necessary, you know, and certainly looking for philanthropic dollars to help promote the arts in Boston.
Mike Ross.
I've called for a 1% for art, which many other cities do, and I would use those funds to bring art into every single one of our schools. And I would also, we should just be so far more permissive and allowable and progressive around permitting, around public art. Art should spill outside of our many art museums and be in the parks and in the neighborhoods of our city. It should be a part of everyday life, and we really have to work on that because we have a long way to go on it.
Marty Walsh.
I was the first candidate in this race to announce that I would elevate the Arts Commission to a cabinet level position. We certainly have to fully fund the arts program in doing so, and also we have to work with our developers as far as making sure that we can create a fund to match the mass cultural grants that used to happen in the city of Boston, so we can match the fund dollar for dollar.
Charles Clemons?
Yes, arts is therapeutic, holistic, and it also creates jobs. As the founder, one of the founding parents of Boston Arts Academy, I would say the funding would simply come from colleges and universities pay something called in lieu of. And residents, we pay property taxes. If colleges and universities for 1 year could pay the same amount of taxes that residents pay in Massachusetts, it would generate $47 billion.
Would you propose that?
Absolutely.
For
Use
1
my
year or for
executive
more than
power.
for
1 year, just 1 year, and we could get Massachusetts out of the deficit, and then we would have extra money to invest in our schools and the arts and provide jobs for our residents.
So you would abolish the payment in lieu of taxes for a year?
Say that again?
This is a new proposal I'm hearing. So you would abolish that payment in lieu of taxes for 1 year
For
to
1
fund
year, absolutely.
to fund the arts, to fund
To fund the arts, to fund education, to fund jobs. It's about doing the right thing.
Felix Arroyo?
Absolutely. I'll have a line item in our budget directly towards arts. One of the other places I'll find money is by increasing the linkage funds, as I spoke earlier, and move some towards arts. Let me be clear. I know that arts in our small business districts, in fact, helps our economy. I know that arts in our neighborhoods that helps public safety. And I know that arts in our schools helps me close the achievement gap. Arts is key for the future of this city. I want to add one more thing. As the brother of someone, my brother, who lives off of his art, is an artist who lives off of his art, we have got to create more affordable housing for artists. We have to make credit much easier for them to open their business and work their businesses. If we want arts in our city, guess what? We need artists in our city. And we should have housing that's affordable to artists so that they can stay.
John Barros.
Agreeing with Felix, we need affordability for affordable housing for artists. We also need to make sure that art exists in our schools. Our children need arts, and we have schools that are turning around based on an arts model. And Orchard Garden, I'd point to Orchard Garden, is that bringing that community together and making strong communities based on arts and building on arts. We need to make sure that the city invests in the arts, and so part of the city's general fund needs to come to the arts. It's a shame that the number that I learned was that Boston was spending $2.50 per capita when New York was spending $18 per capita, and Boston's got to do better than that.
Charlotte Guller-Ritchie.
So I would establish an office of arts, for the arts and cultural innovation. We just came out of this recession. We know that funding for the arts dried up in many respects, and I would want to use public dollars, leverage those public dollars to attract private dollars for the arts. And like several of my colleagues have said, would absolutely focus on the 127 schools in the Boston public school system to make sure that every one of those schools had access to the arts. We have partners that provide arts. I would want to push that. I benefited myself from a very strong arts education, and I think that's what we need to have at every one of our schools in the city.
Charles Yancey.
As vice chair of the Brown Fund for the City of Boston, I've had the opportunity of reviewing many, many proposals. Some of them look fantastic. I would ask our business community, and particularly those who are seeking to develop new structures in the City of Boston, to devote at least 1% of those development dollars to go to some form of art, not necessarily the type of art that the Brown Fund finances, but even some of the livelier arts. And to particularly, I'm thinking about the many nights I spent at Franklin Park, at Alma Lewis in the Park in the 1960s, where I was able to spend a little time with my soon-to-be wife back in the 1960s.
Let's hear briefly from Bill Walzak.
Okay. I support a 1% building fund. I think that we should allow for voluntary payments to the Arts Commission from property tax bills. I support the idea of pilot programs for colleges, for museums to be allocated towards our school system to be able to promote the arts as part of, instead of payment in lieu of taxes. I think we should be able to do public appeals for outdoor art, and I will create a creative economy office within a revamped development agency to make sure that we work with artists to build a creative economy.
John Conley?
If we want arts in all of our schools, we need a different teacher's contract, because the one we have gives us the shortest school day in urban America. That's why I cast the only vote against it. But I want to champion the arts in Boston. Chicago and Los Angeles started $30 million a year in investment in the arts. Boston, $1 million. That's why we need to elevate arts and culture to a cabinet-level department, drive an arts and culture agenda. And one piece we haven't talked about here, we want to see robust public art, brimming through our city. We want to see pop-up art galleries, storefront theater, and let's recognize on the funding piece, Mike Ross has a great idea on that, but the second piece is, if the city shows that it's real about an arts agenda, the private dollars are going to come in to help enhance it.
Thank you.
Okay, last question of the evening is about education, and it first goes to Marty Walsh. This past year's discussion of new school assignment plan for the city drew sharp focus on the unequal distribution of quality schools across the city. This is such an easy question to ask, and it's such a hard question to answer and then get accomplished. How would you, as mayor, ensure that students in every neighborhood have access to a quality education?
Thank you for that question. First of all, we need to continue to improve reforms in our school. I've done it at the legislative level, as I said earlier, with the level 4. We need to look into the level 3 schools and make the changes in contracts and make the changes in the culture of our school department so that we can address the issues in the level 3 schools that we have in the city of Boston. I've toured around the city an awful lot during this campaign for mayor, and I've been in a lot of level 3 schools. One of them is the Harvard Kent in Charlestown. And I had a chance to walk through that school, and there's a good culture in that school, there's a good life in that school, but there's not additional programming that school needs to be able to take that jump from level 3 up to level 2 and up to level 1. So that's one thing I would do. Also, we need to improve our school buildings in the city of Boston. We have 80 school buildings right now in the city of Boston that were built between 1870 and 1927, and we send kids to schools that their roof is leaking, there's no air conditioner in the summertime, there's barely heat in the wintertime. We need to do better. Our kids and our families deserve better. So what I want to do is a plan to make sure that we have good quality schools, buildings in every neighborhood, as well as a good quality school administration in every neighborhood. And we have to do it also by planning, and we also have to prepare our young teachers. In our city of Boston right now, we have an 87% children of color in our school system, and we have less than 20% teachers of color. We need to do a better job with that as well.
Marty Walsh, thank you. Felix Arroyo.
Thank you. I'm a proud graduate of the Boston Public Schools. In fact, every one in my family has used the Boston Public Schools, and my mother and my wife and my sister, Boston Public School teachers. We have got to close the achievement gap that's leaving too many of our students behind. That's a very serious issue. I've released a plan on how we close the achievement gap, and by closing the achievement gap, you improve the Boston Public Schools for everyone. And you can find that on my website at forwardfelix.com. Here's the Cliff Notes version. Universal preschool. No longer should it be lottery. Every child should be guaranteed a seat in preschool. We have to extend the school day to bring arts and theater and music and dance and phys ed and sports to every student. Our high school curriculum for every student should be introduced to science, technology, engineering, math, financial literacy. But I also want to add this. My wife, 10 years ago, had her first day on the job. She walked into an empty classroom. We had to buy everything in that classroom. We have to do budgeting better, start from the bottom up, and fund the classroom before we fund Court Street.
Need to stop you there, Bill Walzak.
Sure. We need to start really early. My plan calls for connecting healthcare to education, beginning with pregnancy, because it's not the education, not the school system that deals with children before age 5, it's the healthcare system. If we're going to be able to make sure that children grow up healthy enough to learn, we need to connect healthcare and education. We also need to make sure that we have universal early childhood education, because we know that it dramatically increases the potential of graduating from high school. We need autonomous schools with excellent principals. We need the accountability to be at the school level, and we need to make sure that we have tutors in every school so that children don't fall behind.
Okay, Charlotte Golar-Ritchie.
Okay, leadership. We're going to get a new school superintendent. We need to have somebody who has excellent background and experience improving quality in an urban school district. We want to have principals who will be wonderful leaders and and create an environment of respect where, you know, young people can flourish. We need to address the management issues. Court Street, as we've come to understand, is a bureaucracy, and it feels more as a command and control center rather than a resource and support center. We need to address the curriculum issues. We've learned some things from charter schools, sure, and we've learned some things from good public schools. We need to scale them up, replicate them. We need to address the achievement gap. We need voc ed. We need arts and STEM. We need to address capital improvements, as we've heard. But I would also engage our graduates of the Boston Public Schools, and I would encourage the establishment of alumni association so our students,
And
those who've been through the system, can contribute to its improvement.
I need to stop you there. I'm sorry, Charles Clemons.
Also, we need to have a direct pipeline from the Boston Public Schools to our Boston Public Colleges. If we can have statistics that say how many children are going to go to prison by the 4th grade, well, we can do the same thing as far as having that pipeline to college, and from college, those teachers coming back. We have to make sure that our teachers are standing in front of those students, but the students need to have teachers who look like them, who love them, who care about them, so they can be inspired to be those teachers. And then also, we have to make sure that when they open up those books, they see themselves in that book.
I need to stop you there. I'm sorry, Dan
So
Conley.
your question was about neighborhood schools, Bob, I believe, and there's still quite an appetite for more of a neighborhood school model here in Boston, I think across all races and in all communities. But until all 127 schools are of high quality, we can't have a truly and full neighborhood school system. I think there's a direct correlation, however, between parental engagement and school success. And it's easier for parents to access a school because they live in that neighborhood. That's so critically important. Parent engagement is critical, but if we are going to fully reform these schools fully, we need to turn them upside down, shift that autonomy and decision-making down to the school level, invest in teacher training, and really engage our parents.
Sorry, John Conley.
We have to remember the goal here, because we get all tripped up sometimes. We want to make sure every child can get a high-quality education. Right now, as we're sitting here, there are 2 level 1 schools in Roxbury, and they weren't there 4 years ago. So what's the formula? You need a great principal, and that means we need to invest money in a principal pipeline, but you've got to give that principal the freedom to lead and make the hiring decisions and to extend that school day and have full enrichment for our students. That means we got to cut the bureaucracy and decentralize, and we got to change our teachers' contract. If we don't do either of those things, we can't replicate the success.
Got to cut you off. We're bumping up against it. The end of the program. Charles Yancey.
We cannot allow the status quo to continue, where because of where you live, you're disadvantaged with regards to getting a decent education in the city of Boston. I think the plan that was passed was punitive towards children of color. We cannot allow a city where our high school students are going to substandard buildings. We have 4,000 Boston Public High School students who are not attending high school buildings. We must encourage parental involvement by enforcing the parental school leave ordinance that was passed 1994, which says you can take 3 days off of your job to visit your child during school hours, much as what my parents did when they were putting 9 children through the Boston Public Schools.
And Charles, I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. John Barrows.
There's no question we need to invest in 0 to 5. For every dollar we spend on a 0 to 5 education, we are saving $17 in the back end. We also need to invest in the children that are leaving Boston Public Schools, particularly from the age of 16 to 24. There's about 12,000 of them out there, and we need alternative programs to help them. But what we've learned is focus, autonomy, and investments in our schools. We have not turned around schools without additional investments, and as mayor, I will make sure that all 3 of those things are present.
And last word on this, Mike Ross.
I would add to everything that has been set up here also partnerships. We're not in a cornfield here. We're in the city of Boston, and we have a huge opportunity to leverage those partnerships. But the other thing is if a kid is going to bed hungry or scared, we have problems in our communities, and we have to bring those communities back. It's about education, but it's not just about education. It's about restoring and strengthening and bringing back our neighborhoods that are craving that to happen.
We are bearing down on the last few minutes, very few minutes of tonight's forum. I should just remind everyone that this is 90.9 WBUR and WBUR.org. Our mayoral forum is streaming tonight at tbf.org and umb.edu. So, because we had such a rich conversation on such a large number of topics, you're actually going to have a brief 10 seconds for your final closing statements, and we're going to start over here with Marty Walsh.
I'd like to thank the Boston Foundation, WBUR, and Chancellor Keith Motley for hosting us tonight. And I'd like to ask the voters out there to consider me, Marty Walsh, for mayor next Tuesday. And to find more information out, go to martywalsh.org. Today I released my education policy, and I have all my policies on my webpage. And thank you very much for hosting tonight.
Thank you. Dan Conley.
Better jobs, taking ed reform to the next level, growing the middle class. I'm very optimistic about Boston's future. With the right leadership, we can go from good to great. I ask for your vote on September 24th.
I'd like to use my 10 seconds to congratulate those principals from Orchard Gardens and from the Trotter School from going from 4 to 1. They've made us proud, and I'd ask the people of Boston for their vote on the 24th. Thank you.
You
so
being
much.
Michael Ross, yes.
This is Michael
For the
Ross.
radio audience,
Yes,
Charles
thank you.
Clemons.
First, I'd like to give thanks to God and give thanks to the audience, and of course, give thanks to you. I'm the first name on the ballot, and I have to give a big shout out to my son, Charles L. Clemons III, who attends UMass Boston.
Felix Arroyo.
My name is Felix Arroyo. I'm committed to ensuring that everyone in Boston has access to opportunities. We do that by creating pathways out of poverty. We do that by closing the achievement gap, and we do that by making sure that everyone has a voice in the direction of the city, and especially those most affected. For more information on me, please visit forwardfelix.com, and I ask for your vote on Tuesday, September 24th.
Charlotte Golarich.
I am so pleased that I've had this privilege to run this campaign for mayor here in the city of Boston. I love this city. I want this city to be the world-class city we know it can be. But I also feel that we need to pull together and unite around these shared goals, and that includes tackling issues of poverty, tackling issues of homelessness, dealing with this issue of gun violence in some of our communities, and I'm going to do that as the next mayor of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you. John Barros.
Thank you very much. It was good to be here tonight. Thanks for all the organizers. Boston can be better. We can be better by opening up city government and making it more transparent and making it more participatory. Boston can only be better, though, if we lift up all ties, lift up all neighborhoods, and make sure that every neighborhood is strong and healthy so that our systems have a chance, so education can work, so we can make sure that Boston's economy is at its strongest. And as mayor, I would do that. Vote John Barrow, September 24th.
Thank you, John Barros. Charles Yancey.
I've had the honor and privilege of representing the people of Boston for 30 years on the Boston City Council, serving as City Council President one of those years. I will work very hard to make sure that Boston becomes the cleanest city, the safest city, and the city with the best school system in the nation.
John Conley.
I'm John Connolly. I'm a former teacher. I'm a Boston Public School parent, and I want to make changing our schools job one, but because it matters for every Bostonian. Safer streets, we need better schools. Stronger economy, we need better schools. I'm asking for your vote on Tuesday, September 24th. Thank you.
Bill Walczak.
Next Tuesday, you can elect a proven innovator, a chief executive officer, a proven change agent, someone who will stop the casino. You can elect me. My name is Bill Walczak. I'm second on the ballot.
Well, thank you to everyone. Thank you for everyone who's joined us tonight. You can listen to any part of this forum again at WBUR.org. Thanks for being with us. I'm Meghna Chakrabati.
I'm Bob Oakes. Thanks to everyone who took part tonight, the candidates, the Boston Foundation, UMass Boston. Remember, the preliminary election is Tuesday. The decision is yours. Vote.
The University of Massachusetts, Boston. It's just minutes from downtown and one of the best values in the country. A nationally recognized institution of academic excellence and research, UMass Boston offers more than 150 undergraduate and graduate programs, 16 Division III sports, and more than 100 student organizations. To learn more about the opportunities waiting for you at UMass Boston, visit in person or online. UMass Boston, a research university with a teaching soul.